and welcome everyone to ET Studios, powered by Zscaler. Now, cloud adoption in India is moving at record speed, driven by Digital India and a wave of digital first enterprises. But with that speed comes risk. And the challenge is clear. How do we build cloud security that not only protects but also enables innovation for the long term? To discuss this, I'm joined in by Amit Joshi, CISO at Hindalco Industries Limited, and Riyaz Tambe, Senior Director of Solution Consulting at Zscaler India. Together, they bring both the practitioner's perspective and the technology perspective to this very important conversation. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. And we'll get directly into the cloud security part from risk to resilience. Under the Digital Bharat initiative, there has been a lot of misconceptions around cloud security. Like we've been using a lot of cloud under the initiative, but we still hear a lot of misconception. And let's start with the reality check. I'll start with you, sir. What are those misconceptions that you hear most often when it comes to the cloud?
So I think the first misconception or the myth that we hear is clouds are not safe, right? And this is not something new. We have been hearing this when the cloud started. That clouds are not safe. You don't have the control over what's been the controls implemented. What's the data and who is accessing our data as well. So those are some misconceptions. But I think uh, cloud really has given many of the organization, not just small scale or medium or the large scale, but I think those organizations have at least got the flexibility that what they are hosting, how they are hosting, and who are going to access their systems as well, right? So I think that is something which is really the cloud has given that.
All right, taking that same question across to you, Riyaz, what are those misconceptions that you get to hear around cloud security?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And the way I'd say it is, see again, every environment has been used to, protecting the data which was residing mainly in the walls of the data centers. And with cloud, what happens is it's the fear of, oh, you know what, am I losing control of data? Why? Because now the data is sitting in someone else's data centers, which is cloud. But the point to understand here is why do we leverage cloud? Cloud is all about delivering services in a more agile manner. Cloud is more about making sure that we can scale whenever required, and there are many business benefits that we see with cloud being used. So with that in mind, I think it's more of a myth that what cloud is not secure. In fact, the controls that are in place today, and one of the things that a lot of customers in India or a lot of environments in India talk about generally is where is our data going? I think that's the main question that comes in everyone's mind. But I think with the strong focus of the government that we have in India right now, I think every organization, including Zscaler, right, we've taken data sovereignty as a very, very important aspect of how we deliver services within India. So that's like a number one priority for us. So keeping all those things in mind and also trying to make sure that we give that comfort to customers, the data privacy is taken care of. None of the, while yes, there are services that we connect back, outside of India, but from a sovereignty point of view, of making sure that data remains India within the boundaries of the country. So I think it's more of a conversation to have. It's all about making sure that we have the right services and the layers of security in place to make sure data is safe. So to answer the question, yes, it's definitely a misconception, which it's just a dialogue that can be had, and we can resolve that.
All right, Amit, now, bringing you into the conversation as well when it comes to the misconception part from the enterprise perspective. Is there any resistance that you face within the organizations, when team thinks as in what can cloud secure and what it can't by default?
So I would say now the thought process are changing. Earlier, definitely there was a thought that what should we place in the cloud. But now I think the business ask itself are changing because they also understand that they want is the availability, right? If any application is hosted, always we look for is the CIA tried, right? So is it available for me or for my customers for 24/7? So I think that's the business ask which comes. Then the second would be is the to whom we are giving this access as well. Is it for internal employees or is it for my customers or consumers or partners, right? So who are going to access that? So I think now the concept of earlier when there was resistance, but I think now there is more of ask which comes that we need to host that on the cloud. Uh, But yes, apart from that, when we talk about that, is the resistance would be is what are those things which we are hosting as well, because we really don't want everything to get hosted on the cloud, but yeah, very selective on what we are placing there as well.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing that point. And when we talk about the cloud, gentlemen, zero trust is something that is also a buzzword, right? Everyone perhaps talks about zero trust, but in practice, how does it reshape? And I'll take that to you, Riyaz. How does it reshape, the way we sort of protect applications and workloads in cloud?
Yeah, that's a very good question again. See, again, from a cloud point of view, I think for every organization, leveraging cloud is an imperative. If they have to be more profitable, if they have to make sure that they are agile to the customer's demand and the market reality, it's imperative that everybody uses cloud. Now, the point is, when it comes to cloud, or let's take up security generally, right? Traditionally, historically, what the practice has been that we have applications which are accessed by our users, and then we have a layer of network which is connecting the user to the application, right? And that could be applications could be irrespective of where it's residing. It could be sitting in the data center, it could be sitting on the cloud. Unfortunately, what has happened in the past is while there is a level of security that is ingrained into the application, but lot many times what happens is a lot of money is spent on securing the network, and what we actually want to achieve is make sure that the users are able to access the application in a secure manner. So the idea is connecting the user to the application, but the security layer is the network layer. And hence, what happens is we are dependent on the network to define certain security policies, which is the traditional way of doing things, which is based on IP and ports. And IP and ports today are completely, irrelevant in the world of security. With the challenges that we see with the modernization of threats, the evolution of threats, challenges like lateral movement, challenges like malwares and ransomware becoming very common. And the simple, I always, when I have my conversation, I always say, right, give me one example of a breach that happened that did not have these layers of security. In spite of having layers and layers of security, breaches still go through. The question is why? And the fundamental thing is we spent a lot of money on securing the network, but not focused on how do you make sure that a user is able to connect to an application better. Zero trust solves that problem. The whole idea is not depending on IP and ports for defining your security policies and also inspecting the traffic between them. The idea is who the user is. Basically, then it should be identity aware. And then the other important also is the posture elements of it, right? So where is the traffic coming from? Who is the users doing it? And then where does the user need to have the right level of access? I think the other important challenge when it comes to security is the level of access that somebody needs to have. And by default, somebody, when say for example somebody is authenticated to access an application, the best I would say a best practice to follow is least privilege model, right? How do we enforce that for every application and for every user that's happening? Zero trust solves their problems, and hence I feel the way forward is going to be zero trust. Why? Because you're taking care of identity, you're taking care of security, and also maintaining the levels of access that anybody should have while they're trying to access the application, irrespective of where they're sitting.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that those points, and I will of course come to you also, Amit sir. From the zero trust perspective, when he was also talking about a lot of things that zero trust is able to do. Now, what is that biggest change that you see? That zero trust forces on how CISOs now think about the user access or workload protection.
So I think this entire concept started with the defense in depth, right? When we talked about I think few years back, we have been talking that we have to implement the securities on the different layers, and then we look at how the entire the access or the flow flow goes as well. But I think now the zero trust specifically, when we talk about that, like you said, least privilege, right? So when we look at that, are we reviewing those users that whether they really need those access? Probably we might have given them the access to the administrator privileges as well, but they really accessing it or not, right? Because those are very critical accesses that we have given. So probably we have to do the while we implement the zero trust, because zero trust, when you have to implement, you will have to have on the network layer side as well, on the identity side as well, right? And probably on the application side as well when you are hosting on cloud or anywhere, right? So I think that the access review is something which will really also help, for strengthening the entire zero trust as well. Because while you are implementing zero trust, you really don't know, whether those users are really using that or utilizing it or not as well,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
So I think that is something which really helps as well to strengthen. And definitely zero trust is something which, I always strongly recommend, because you have to have those accesses, reviewed. You need to have those accesses, given as a least privilege as well. And the accesses has to be given only to those users who really need. Now, like what you said, right, whether it can be an employees or it can be a customers or consumers as well. So it depends on that, what you are really giving access to
Yeah,
them.
I'll just add a additional point to that. I completely agree with what Amit just mentioned, right? It's important to be context aware, right? That's the main thing. And every environment is very different. So it's not just about saying, you know what, I have identity and application based policies. Every environment's context is very, very different, right? And the way to do it is we all talk about AI these days, right? And I think AI, in a way, helps us to build that contextual awareness of which user needs to have what level of access and what's the level of access that the user needs while trying to access a certain application. So I think the systems, I mean, as a solution, there is a lot of new capabilities that today help us to be more context aware, in line to make sure that our environments are more secure. The second element is, what are we trying to secure? Ultimately, why do we need zero trust? What are we trying to secure is the data, right? And I'd like to also call out that with the recent DPDP Act that the government of India is pushing, right? I think it's important, and that's where Amit becomes a very, very important stakeholder in that whole process. It's ultimately important for us to make sure that we define the right policy to make sure our data is taken care of, and hence the whole contextual awareness of user, application, and data all put together should become the foundation for defining security policies. I just thought I'll add that.
Now, of course, as you were talking about that, the context for every environment is very different. And in India now, a lot of organizations are moving to multi-cloud, right? Where the context, of course, for different environments is very different. So how can CISOs or how can organizations can perhaps look at, on the consistent policies across different environments?
So that's again a very practical question, right? Because multi-cloud is a reality, right? I talk to a lot of organizations on a daily basis, and I've not seen one environment which says, oh, you know what, I'm only on one cloud. That never happens, because every cloud brings their own benefits. From a CISO's point of view, from a security point of view, if I have to take a step back, what do I need first? The first thing that is needed is visibility. In the world of security, if you don't have visibility, you are blinded, and in blind spots are not good for you, right? So I think the fundamental thing is, irrespective of how many clouds you're using, and I think I would like to use the term hybrid cloud, right? Because while organizations are using multiple clouds, a lot of data also resides on-prem, right? For various reasons, for business reasons, for cost effectiveness, there are multiple implications to it, right? So I would rather want to say it as like a hybrid environment. So in a hybrid world, it becomes more complex. Why? Because data is distributed. It's not sitting in one place. Hence, having visibility of where my data is, having visibility of who's accessing it, having visibility of what are those applications in different layers or different in various various types of infrastructure sitting where. I think that's the fundamental thing. Without which, it'll be very difficult to define a framework, a policy framework, or governance around it. So I think solutions are there. Like, for example, we provide that visibility across, or irrespective of where the user is. So one is, the challenge is, the data could be sitting in any hybrid environment. On top of that, the user could be anywhere. The user could be sitting in office, the user could be sitting in an offshore location, or the user could be maybe working from home. So irrespective of where it is, I think the fundamental thing is having visibility. After that, which again, using the same contextual awareness, it allows us to build policies on top of that.
Right. So I'll just continue to what you said as well, right? Because visibility, what you said. So whenever I get into any kind of discussion with any of the OEMs or any partners, first the question which I ask is your solution going to give me the discovery solution or feature as well? Because that's what is going to give me the visibility of my entire landscape. Because today we are we might be on the hybrid, what you said, right? We have on-prem, we have multiple clouds as well, we have multiple applications, SaaS applications, which are hosted by someone else as well, right? And that applications are accessed by our users or our partners, everyone. So I think that really becomes a big challenge for any CISO, uh, because we really don't have that kind of entire visibility, right? So that's where I ask always is, does your solution give me the discovery? until unless if I don't get that kind of visibility, I will not have my roadmap or my action items as well defined. And to define that, I at least need that visibility. Probably we always have to live with that dark spot where we really don't know where the systems are. So, but yeah, really, that really helps to build the entire framework, that what we are really, serving to our internal customers, our internal stakeholders, and to our customers as well. So that really defines that, how this entire cloud strategy or entire cloud implementation would be defined. And then, then take it forward. Then what are the different security controls that we really need to implement as well. So that really helps.
Can you elaborate also on the operational challenges you face while keeping the policies uniform across different environments?
Right. So I think that the operational challenges are always going to be there, and if it is not there, probably we will not have the jobs as well. But the operational biggest challenge is right the multi-cloud or multi or the hybrid tenants that we have. Right, everyone works in a different way. Uh, let's say if I have to implement a CSPM solution, it's a very standard cloud solution that we look at, right? But there are so many multiple hybrid clouds, or the cloud providers, whether you talk about Google, Azure, or Oracle, or IBM. So everyone now, they have their own native tools and capabilities as well. And when you have to implement native, or then you have to decide whether you want to bring any outside tools as well, that becomes the biggest challenge, because you really have to manage the native tools controls, and then you have to manage the tools which you are going to implement as well. So I think that really becomes a big challenge from the management and from the operational perspective. But yeah, you have to survive with that, and you have to build your entire strategy around that, so that how well you have getting the visibility, what solutions you are implementing as well, and then any operational challenges which comes day to day, you have to tackle them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And also, as we're moving, gentlemen, towards the end of the conversation, there's always this tension, security as a gatekeeper or security as an enabler, right? So, how can we, and I'll take this point across to you, Riyaz, how can we make sure that security is not hampering the innovation process? It's actually accelerating the entire process.
So you mentioned security is a gatekeeper or security is an enabler. I would say security is an imperative. It's an imperative. You can't I think any business today cannot function without having the right layers of security. And I'm sure Amit would agree with that. The reason being, I think even if you look at regulations and even you look at industries, there is a lot of awareness around security. As a citizen, I think people are aware of data privacy concerns, challenges with how when a security breach happens, compromise of data, things like those. I think the awareness is very high. Hence, for an organization to not think of security as an imperative will be a blunder. Why? Because a small incident can actually damage the brand, right? And hence, I feel, as I mentioned, it's an imperative, and it's on every It's a responsibility now for every organization to make sure that they have the right controls in place, the right visibility in place, and the controls in place to make sure that their environments are secure. Because it's not just about their own business, but they're also dealing with customer data, right? There is data from the customer side, and we have an obligation. There's an obligation to make sure that our environments are secure. So hence, I feel security is an imperative.
No, of course. And, before we end this conversation, gentlemen, from an India's regulatory landscape, if we see from that lens, what is that blueprint you have for the cloud ready environment where it balances the resilience, the innovation part of it, and also the compliance part of it? I'll start with you, Amit, and I'll end with you, Riyaz.
Right. So I think good point is as an India, I think there is a lot of push which is coming to secure all our entities, right? Whether it is a critical services that has been catered, or any of your BFSI, or so I think that is really changing the thought process, like you said, right? So there is a lot of awareness which has came, probably not just because of the government, but the other our functions which are catering as well. See, BFSI, you have a lot of compliance requirement and all, but the manufacturing industry, it is completely because of the business which is asked, right? It's a business ask which is coming, and that's driving the entire security. Whether you talk about the in-house security tools or capabilities that you need to build or implement as well, or you have to go to any of the cloud or any of the external solutions as well. So I think that is really changing as well. The business is something which is the ask, for today's, to have the business business growth as well as the security. We don't compromise, right, on that. So I think that is the really the change which is coming up.
All right. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, with the regulations and the sort of importance now, with again the new DPDP Act coming in place and all that, I think the way I think is it's important for every organization to have a data centric approach, right? While a lot of effort has been put in the past to make sure that security is more consolidated, it's integrated. Why? Because that's how you can make your environment much more secure. But I think now is the time to make sure that we have a data centric approach. The center point for me, what I want to protect is my data. And irrespective of where my data resides, my data can reside on my users' endpoints, my data resides on my data centers, on the cloud, it's in SaaS applications, it's everywhere. So having, I think, a data-centric approach with the focus on data these days and the act now coming in force, I think that's what is the prudent way of moving forward. And I think that's where a lot of organizations will see the benefit of having a holistic solution, something like a zero trust, which can help them to comply to certain regulations, also make sure their environments are secure.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being a part of this conversation. You know, what I realize is that cloud security in the next decade won't be about locking things down. It will be about building resilience so that businesses can perhaps innovate with confidence. Right. Thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. And to our viewers, stay tuned for many more such interesting conversations only at ET Studios.